That feeling at 9, 10 o'clock at night, the day's done, you've eaten well, you've done everything right, and there's still this pull, this background noise saying, find something. Not hunger, not quite, it's something else. And you've probably told yourself it's weakness or boredom, or that you just don't have the discipline. Here's what is actually a biological signal your body is producing because of something that happened earlier in the day. It's nothing to do with willpower. I tracked this pattern systematically during the 70-day rhythm reset. Sleep quality against what I was reaching for in the evenings, against how well I'd eaten during the day. What came out of that data was pretty consistent. On the nights where the daytime eating had been good and the sleep the night before had been solid, the evening pull was quiet, calm. On the nights after poor sleep or a high stress day, it wasn't. Not dramatically, not catastrophically, just persistently there, asking for something. That's ghrelin and leptin doing their job on a broken signal. Biology, not character. So in this one, here's what we're covering. First, what actually is producing that evening signal. It starts earlier than most people think, and it's not about the evening at all. Second, the sleep connection, because that surprised me, how much the previous night's sleep showed up in what I was reaching for 14 hours later. Third, what I tracked and what it confirmed about the mechanism. And fourth, what actually moved the needle. Not restriction, not a stricter eating window, the inputs that were creating the signal in the first place. As always, this is my data, my body, tracked over 2 years, not a clinical protocol, not a replacement for support, if that's something you need, just the pattern and what I made of it. So let's be fair about what we're actually up against here. The conventional view, and I held this for most of my adult life and started well into my teens if I'm honest, is that eating at night is a willpower problem. You've had your calories, you're not hungry, you're just weak or bored or undisciplined. And if you could just hold it together between the dinner and bed, you'd be fine. This isn't some fringe idea, it's baked into the standard advice. GPs say it, diet books say it, the NHS guidance on weight management is full of it. Don't eat after 8, brush your teeth early, distract yourself. All of it assumes the driver is psychological, a habit you've let get out of hand, a character flaw you need to work on. And I understand why the guidance points there, because the behaviour does look like weakness from the outside, especially when someone says they're trying to lose weight and then describes eating half the kitchen at 10 o'clock at night. Peter Attia, doctor, cites the Spiegel research group, summarised what the actual data shows pretty bluntly. Chronic sleep deprivation suppresses leptin and elevates ghrelin. That combination causes people to eat around 300 extra calories the following day and makes them significantly more likely to reach for high sugar, high fat food specifically, not random food, the specific category that activates the reward system hardest. That's not a character study, that's a hormonal state, and it starts, and this is the part I'd completely missed, the night before. I want to show you what this looked like for me because the pattern only became obvious when I had data to look at. Most of my adult life, from being a teenager, genuinely I had this thing in the evening. Not every evening, but often enough that I thought of it as just part of how I was wired. The day would be fine. I'd eat reasonably. And so then somewhere around 9, 10 o'clock, there'd be this pull towards something, a biscuit, crisps, whatever was in the house. Not because I was particularly hungry, more like the day wasn't quite finished. Something needed closing off. For years, I assumed this was just me. Personality type. I'm an all or nothing person. I know that about myself, and I filed the evenings thing under the same heading. Just something to manage. I didn't connect it to anything upstream, not to sleep, not to blood sugar, not to what I'd eaten that day. It was just a standalone thing that happened, and when I gave into it, I thought less of myself for it. Then I started tracking. Day 5 of the 70-day rhythm reset, October 17th, 2025. 4 hours sleep the night before. Energy at 6.5 out of 10 all day. And what happened that night? Crisps, chocolate inside my eating window. So the rhythm held, but the pull was unmistakable. The night before that, day 4, I'd had 7.5 hours, eating went smoothly. The evening pull was quiet, almost not there. I noticed it once and put it down to coincidence. Then it happened again, day 11 of the reset, 5.5 hours sleep. Eating day, the pull was louder. Day 12, 4.5, same pattern. And then the clearest example of the lot. Day 22 through 25 of the reset, 4 consecutive nights of 4 to 5 hours sleep, cortisol elevated, decision-making failing. And on day 25, I ate a full tub of Millionaire's shortbread. Not because I was hungry, because the circuits would normally say not now, had nothing left to run on. That one I logged. because it was important, because awareness didn't prevent it. And that was data too. What I had on the good nights, the 7 and 8 hour nights with clean eating during the day, was not more willpower. I had the same personality I've always had. What I had was leptin doing its job, a satiety signal that was working, a brain that wasn't being told by its own hormones that an emergency was underway. The evenings that went smoothly weren't me being stronger, they were me sleeping better. There was no dramatic intervention here, no medication stopped, no GP conversation specifically about the sleep craving connection. What changed was simpler than that, and honestly more sustainable. I got serious about sleep as a foundation, not nice to have. That meant a few things in practice. A consistent bedtime, not working until I fell asleep at the desk, getting out first thing, a walk, fresh air, actual daylight, to reset the circadian rhythm rather than just hoping it sorted itself out. The evidence on morning light and sleep architecture is fairly solid. Your circadian clock runs on light inputs as much as anything else. Give it the signal in the morning, and in the evening, chemistry tends to follow. There was no signal date on this one. It wasn't the kind of intervention where I can say, October, the whatever, stopped doing X, started doing Y. It was more gradual than that. Months of paying more attention to what happened to my evenings on the days I'd slept well versus the days I hadn't. And the dietary piece was the same. During the rhythm reset, 10 weeks of documented fasting cycles, tracked daily. I noticed something else. When I'd had a proper run of clean eating, no sugar for several days, the evening pull quietened down considerably. Not gone entirely, but different, quieter. More like curiosity than demand. The day 69 moment made this concrete. I'd had what I call fake Christmas the night before. The family tradition, proper festive food, including some biscuits, chocolate. The next morning I woke up with something I hadn't had in weeks. A kind of food noise in my brain from the moment I woke. Not physical hunger, just constant low-level static. That's what UPF does to the satiety feedback loop. The signals get scrambled. You're left with noise rather than clear information. Clean evenings followed clean days. Not because I was trying harder on those days, because I was giving the system different inputs. So what does the after period look like? I'll be honest about what the data can and can't show here. I don't have a clean before after blood test for the craving mechanism. Specifically, ghrelin and leptin aren't routinely tested on the NHS. What I have is tracked behaviour across 2 years and a pattern that shows up consistently enough that I trust it. What changed as sleep quality improved, and it did improve substantially, was the ease with which I maintained a time-restricted eating pattern. That's the most direct signal I've got. When sleep was poor, sticking to an eating window took effort. When sleep was solid, it barely registered as something I was doing. The window just happened. Body wasn't happening for anything outside of it. 70 days of the rhythm reset tracked daily. Weight, sleep, energy, eating window, food choices. The correlation between sleep quality the previous night and evening eating behaviour is consistent enough across that dataset that I stopped treating it as a coincidence, somewhere around day 30. The satiety recalibration piece was equally striking. By week 2 of the reset, on the days where sleep had been good and eating had been clean, I was stopping before my planned window closed. Not through discipline, through genuine absence of the pull. Body said enough. I believed it. Day 6 of the reset, October 18th, planned 4-hour eating window, 8 for 2. Body just stopped. Not white knuckling it. The mechanism was working. Compare that to day 5, 4 hours sleep, same person, entirely different evening. And here's the thing that took me the longest thing to accept. The evening that went wrong in the past weren't evidence of something broken about me as a person. They were evidence of what poor sleep does to a specific biological system. When I understood the mechanism, I stopped interrogating my character and started looking at my sleep data. Rather different conclusion. I spent 18 years running my own business. I know how to build a system that works without you having to think about it every day. Turns out the same logic applies to your health. That's what this channel documents, what actually compounds when you get the inputs right. Subscribe if that's interesting to you. What my data suggests, and I want to be clear, this is one person, 2 years of tracking, not a clinical trial, is that the evening craving pattern I'd blamed on my own character for most of my life was almost entirely a downstream consequence of upstream inputs. Sleep quality, blood sugar stability, food choices earlier in the day. These were the levers, not discipline, not motivation, not trying harder at the point where the craving arrived. By the time you're standing in the kitchen at 10 o'clock, reaching for something, the decision has already been made several hours earlier by your hormones, based on what you gave them to work with. That's worth sitting with for a minute. I want to be careful here because none of this means the standard guidance is worthless. If someone has a genuine psychological relationship with food, eating in response to distress, using food as a coping mechanism, experiencing significant guilt or shame around eating, then the biology is one part of a more complicated picture. Sleep and blood sugars are real mechanisms. They're not the whole story for everyone. The guidance around not eating late, not having trigger foods in the house, creating environmental structure, these are not wrong. They're addressing real behaviours. What I'd say is, don't stop there. Look upstream, because if you're addressing the behaviour without addressing what's driving it, you're fighting a hormonal state with willpower. That's an unfair contest. And if any of what I'm describing feels like more than just a pattern to investigate, if your relationship with food is something you're struggling with rather than curious about, this is educational context, not a plan. Your GP is the right first conversation, not a YouTube video. This matters well before anyone has a diagnosis. The mechanism doesn't care whether you have a label attached to it. Sleep deprivation affecting ghrelin and leptin, blood sugar instability affecting the evening reward drive, these operate in anyone whose sleep is disrupted and whose blood sugar has been unstable throughout the day. And they tend to show up in the data years before anyone puts a name on it. If you're noticing a pattern, consistent evening pull, specific cravings that seem out of proportion to actual hunger, difficulty that varies day to day in ways you can't explain, it's worth looking at the inputs before concluding there's something wrong with your character. There probably isn't. If you're thinking about changing anything significant, sleep patterns, eating windows, reducing sugar, and you're on medication, particularly anything that affects blood sugar, please have a conversation with your GP first. Changes to eating patterns can interact with certain medications in ways that matter. If this landed for you and you want to go deeper, I've got a free 14-day rhythm reset guide. Its link's in the description. It covers exactly this kind of thing. Sleep as foundation, eating patterns that work with the biology rather than against it. It's worth a look. And the disclaimer, which I mean seriously, this is educational content. It's not medical advice. If you're on medication, if you've got a condition that affects your blood sugar or sleep, please speak to your GP before changing anything.